Caleb, I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, I'm nervous as usual. A couple of weird things start to happen when I'm going to share. It's like, firstly, I start putting together the structure of what I'm going to say, and as soon as I'm sitting here and it gets handed over, it disappears. I also feel the need to pee a lot. Uh, um, yeah, I thought it would change at some point. I think I'll always be nervous to share. I think we all are, and then that's really for two reasons. I've got an ego, and my ego wants to impress you. I want to say something great, and I want you to cry and laugh with me and stand and applaud. And I'm hoping if I expose that, that will go away so I can talk. And then the other is exposure. You know, as cool as I like to think I am in recovery, that's not who I was when I arrived in this room. And my story is one of a very selfish, nasty, dishonest, manipulative human being who didn't care about anybody, and that's who I really was. And I guess it's difficult to talk about that still. I guess my only comfort is that I'm, to the most part, not that person today. So I wanted to kind of say, well, so much has happened in recovery that I don't want to share about too much on the drinking. I'll just try and stick to recovery, but I almost like you jinx yourself into then talking about your drinking for 40 minutes and then kind of realizing you need to share about recovery in the last 5 minutes. So I hope that's not going to happen. But yeah, 12 years is a long time, and so much has happened that I couldn't possibly do it justice in 45 minutes. So I'm going to do the best I can, to kind of go over all that's happened. To start with, my story's pretty cliche. I had something wrong with me before I picked up alcohol. I think a lot of people relate to that, and I know right from a kid there was something that differentiated me from most of the people in my school, and I'm not just talking about normal fear, I'm talking about crippling fear. I found it very difficult to do most things that normal people do, and I found school quite painful and difficult for that reason. To fit in, to try and be something or somebody that could fit in, I started playing a game from very early on. A game of who do I need to be to fit in with you? Who do I need to be to impress you so that I can operate and I can be a part of and I'll be happy? And I did a lot of shit, mad shit, to try and I was supposed to try not to swear. It's too much to think about. Okay, so. And I guess, to cut a long story short, when I found alcohol, that went away for a while. And I was one of those people who was just completely and utterly fell in love with substances. I wanted to use every different kind of drug, alcohol, anything. I loved the sensation of not just being me and not feeling the way that I felt when I didn't have substances in my system. And my first kind of recollection, because I remember... Well, I don't remember drinking because I kind of drank, puked, passed out, and I don't remember much about that. But my first sort of real thing that stood out to me was the first time I took a sleeping tablet. My mom had some Valium or something, and I remember I don't remember why she gave it to me or if I even stole it. I'm not sure, but I remember the sensation quite clearly, and I remember taking a half back when I could take a half and feel something. Taking a half of this tablet, and everything just became better, And if you fall into the category of an addict, of an alcoholic like I do, you'll do that one thing that most normal people don't do when you take a sleeping tablet, and that's try and stay awake, Because I liked the feeling so much. It was like watching TV was cool. My Coca-Cola tasted better. Everything was just amazing, and from that moment, I had this drive to change the way and alter the way that I feel. And back then we didn't have, street drugs weren't available in my hometown. So what we did was we took over-the-counter chemist, pills, sleeping, diet pills, cold and cough stuff, and and anything you take a large quantity of would have some kind of effect, I guess. Some of them probably didn't even have a narcotic effect. Maybe it starved oxygen to the brain. We thought we were high. I don't know, but just anything, And I can remember taking a box out of my stepmother's cupboard that had all these old pills in them, and just me and a friend of mine taking 10 of whatever and seeing what would happen. I don't know how I'm still sitting here today, because I probably took blood pressure pills, birth control pills, I have no idea. And that's just kind of who I was, and I know it's different for different people, but for me, right from the get-go, I was balls to the walls, and I really loved those first years. Those first years for me were awesome. Feeling part of, using friends, partying, taking all kinds of drugs, drinking, and I just felt like I had arrived in life, But obviously living that way causes problems, and it did. It started to cause problems very early for me and my family. My family started to worry about me. I come from a very good family, a very loving and caring family. I didn't have much to blame, although with my superior intellect, I found ways to blame them. Some pretty ridiculous ways. But I had a good family, and so obviously when I started to I was kidding about the superior intellect part, just scratch that. So obviously when my family started to notice all the things that were changing about me, they started to confront me, and they started to, check up on me, and started to ground me, and so from there, like the real, I guess, damage in my relationships with the people who cared about me began, because from that point onwards, I had to live a very secretive life. I had to lie and manipulate and do what I could to get out and do what I wanted. And I caused my mom especially a lot of stress. I was in the hospital already when I was 16 for a detox, and I had to be rehydrated and all that kind of stuff. And I was in a rehab soon after that, and thus kind of began a 12-year journey of rehabs, and 12 and 12. It's balanced. 12-year kind of journey of just rehab, psych wards, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, all that kind of stuff. My family, my stepfather made a lot of money, so they could afford to do that stuff, I guess, and so that's what I did for most of that part, and friends kind of fell away, kind of social life fell away, and it really just for me became about come out, use, and then go back into some kind of center, get back on my feet, come back out, use, and so it continued. But I guess I never really had any desire to stop, ever, So it was never about listening or trying to do something about my problem. It was just about getting the heat off so that I could, gain some freedom so that I could get back out there and do what I wanted to do, which was party and take drugs and drink. And I guess for me, like one of the very first, I wouldn't say turning points, but kind of moments that stand out was I had a moment where I really wanted to stop. I decided, based on, I was young, I was losing friends, girlfriends, all kinds of stuff, and I thought, let me stop for a while, and I'll just keep it together for a while so that, things can kind of get a bit smoother in my life. And I tried, and I failed very quickly, And I remember going through withdrawal symptoms and trying to do that kind of stuff at home on my own secretly, and how horrific that was, I would last a couple of days until it was just unbearable and I'd have to use. And that was kind of the first time I really started to feel fearful about my future and my using, and the fact, because I kind of thought, like I wasn't really an addict, and if I really wanted to stop, I could. But I started to discover that wasn't the case, with my best intentions, and even when I really tried my best, I wasn't capable. The physical craving was so bad, that obsession and compulsion to drink and use was so bad that I couldn't hold out. And so I did that, I tried like all kinds of different stuff, and like I could spend forever talking about all the different approaches that I tried, and suffice it to say, I think there was a point when I was that I kind of need to share about, that just sort of kind of really puts across how my problem is not really drugs and alcohol, but I kind of had this massive burnout and blowout, and my family kind of abducted me to this little chalet they had by a river, by the Vaal River, and it was like far away from anything, and it kind of dried out there, and I spent about a month or two there, and I was eating, I was still drinking, because alcohol is not a drug. And but I kind of started to get a little bit okay, and I went into town to this party, and I met this girl, and I fell in love, you know. And by the time this had happened, I'd already been living in the streets. Well, you know, I say that, but I had a car. I lived in my car, in my boots. I had been in and out of rehabs and all kinds of stuff, and I was like a proper junkie. And when I met this girl, it all changed, you know. Suddenly, my whole focus shifted onto a relationship, you know, and I think a lot of us do this because not thinking that that's got anything to do with alcoholism, you know, or being an alcoholic or an addict. It's just, you know, now I'm in a relationship and this is going to fix me. And now that I've met this girl, my family were all happy because I'd been single for a long time at this point, in and out of rehab. It's hard to, you know, meet people. So I got into this relationship and I managed to stop taking drugs for the most part. I drank maybe a little more than I should, but, you know, hey, it's like that's just our culture in this country. So that was kind of okay. My parents were super happy. I managed to hold down this job for about a year, you know. I went from being how I was to, for a year, keeping it together. And my mind didn't associate that. And what my mind did with that, like I think a lot of us do, is see, if I really want to, I can keep it together for a period of time. And I probably spent the next 5 years or so trying to get back to that time. Because after the high of the relationship wore off, and I mean, there was a high. It was like obsessed with this woman. And everything was about the relationship and making it better and doing all that kind of stuff. And after about a year, that wore off, you know, as it does in addictive kind of relationships. And I remember being in this mall with her, and I was doing that thing guys do. She was in kind of looking at clothes and stuff, and there were like 3 guys standing outside the shop because it's not cool to be in there looking at clothes. So I'm standing there and I'm thinking to myself, you know, this is really boring, you know. Kind of it had completely lost its draw, and I started thinking, you know, it's been a year. Maybe I can use my drug of choice just today, take the edge off, have a bit of fun. I mean, you know, things are good now, and it'll be okay. And I remember kind of making an excuse and going off and scoring, and I used, and I came back, and everything was fun again, you know. Like, to me, it wasn't so much about the high of drugs. It was about how they made my reality. They made my reality good. You know, I could do boring things would be fun. I'd go there looking at clothes and be like, this is cool, you know, and we should try it, you know, and let's look at this shop, because and that's not me. That's me on drugs, you know, because then everything I'll do anything, and I'll have a 5-hour conversation with my grandfather about the good old days. Who wants to do that? You know what I mean? But like on drugs, I want to do that. I want to do anything. And that for me is alcoholism, you know. It's not about it's the ism. Is I can't do life and be okay with life unless I got something in my system. And so obviously the next morning when I woke up, and it's always that time, you know. Okay, so I had that one use, but now it's time, get back in line and back on track, and, you know. But yesterday was awesome. How am I going to not do today what I did yesterday and just get back to the normality of life? It's impossible. So I used again, and I used again, and I used again, and so it began. And I was in a rehab again about 3 or 4 months later, and there we started the cycle again, you know. And from there, things really deteriorated in my life, you know. Well, I was in and out of rehabs again for quite some time, and eventually she left. And that's another whole story, but you know, kind of everything I'd kind of built up in that year just went to the wayside, and eventually I was just another rehab baby, and I was kind of like lost in the system, you know. I'd done a spell of a psych ward. I'd gone from that psych ward to a religious rehab somewhere in New Hanover. I lied and manipulated my way out of that rehab, and they took me to one here in Durban. And then we smuggled drugs into that rehab, and I used, and I got caught. And so eventually, you know, I remember my mom pleading with them, saying, please, you know, I don't know what else to do with them. I'd been all over the country to rehabs. I'd even been overseas for, you know, this a new advanced wonder drug. What was it called again? Revia, which turned into naltrexone, which eventually became. So always some miracle wonder. I was one of the first South Africans to go up there and use it, which helped me with my physical craving. Didn't help with my mental obsession, compulsion to drink and use. So that didn't work, and so eventually my mom, they were desperate. They said, well, what do we do? He's just... And so they said, well, look, there's this little place has opened up down on the south coast. It's a new rehab. Maybe they'll take him because they don't know what a dick he is. And so kind of, that's how my journey began, And I guess, I have to talk about the house on the hill because that's my experience. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that house, because I'd been to the rooms, I'd been everywhere, and there was something special about this house on the hill. And I remember arriving there, and my cousin was trying to convince me to stay there. So he came back and said, hey, at this rehab, they'll do your washing. I was like, fucking great, another rehab. So but there was something different about people in this program who worked this program. Because I'd been around this, I'd been to the rooms, I spent a lot of years in and out of Narcotics Anonymous and in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my impression was always a bunch of people sitting around bitching and moaning about how shit their lives were. That was my experience, of the couple of meetings that I went to. And there was something different about the people who really lived this program. And it planted a seed. And I was not ready, I was not ready. And I guess I forget sometimes what it's like to be at that point in the progression where you can only see when you can see, and I couldn't see, But what I noticed about this place, which I went back to 7 times over the course of the next 2 years, the only times I was happy was there, I would sit out there. At that point, there was about 5 people, I think, and we would laugh, we would share, we would talk about ourselves. I hadn't had the experience of completely exposing who I was and kind of laughing about that and people relating and that being comfortable. I didn't have that experience. I'd always dealt with professionals and normal people, and no offense to normal people, but they don't get it. And that stuck with me, And I left there and I went back into the nightmare. I didn't listen to anything they told me to do. And I used, and very quickly I wound up in a mess. And I guess this is where the progression of the disease really hit me, because I can remember using for long periods and only having withdrawal symptoms after quite a period of time. And around this point, I would use for a day or two and I'd have withdrawal symptoms already. And the fear started to hit me about how bad I was getting. And I was about 40 kgs around this time. And I spent the next 2 years kind of in and out doing the whole icy intellectual mountain, because although I liked being around my people, when it came to all this hard work and change and, these things I'd have to do for the rest of my life, I wasn't all that keen, But I came back and I went out and I came back and I started to realize that the only times I really laughed and had a good was back there. And then I come back into the nightmare and go back there and I kind of have a little bit of happiness, and then I come back in and I never went anywhere else, Because I guess what a lot of people do is when they don't like the program in one place, they move on to the next place. But I knew there was something different. And eventually, after checking all the boxes of weed is also a drug, don't care if it's God's drug, still going to wind you up back on your drug of choice. Okay, that's true. Alcohol is not a drug because I'm actually a drug addict, and alcohol's not a problem for me. Never really been a heavy drinker except when I wasn't taking drugs, but I don't want to look at that part. So, and then actually I had a beer and then I wound up back in rehab again. And then and I fought, kicked and screamed all the way to a point of complete defeat, And that for me was the last time I came in. And I don't relate to rehab being exceptionally hard when you're willing, It was hard all the times I wasn't willing, because I was getting caught out and, getting tested and, positive. It was all heavy going. But the last time I came into treatment, I was willing. And for me, my recovery just took off. And I can kick myself, and I go back to the thing of you can only see when you can see, because I robbed myself of those 2 years. Because if I had just listened, if I had just given it a try, it would have been different for me. You know what I mean? But that was not not meant to be my experience, I guess. I wasn't at that point. But when I came in the last time, I just asked, I listened, and I did as I was told. Because I finally realized that drugs weren't the problem. You know, it was my behavior. It was the lying. It's like you guys were taking the piss out of me in the play, because that's kind of how I saw things. It's okay to talk in the room and concern people and whatever, but steal the piece of cake out the fridge, because that's not a big deal. It's just a piece of cake, and who's going to miss it anyway? But the principle is, my biggest problem is I know the kind of person that I am. That's the conscience I live with. And it doesn't matter whether somebody caught me out or somebody else knows that I was dishonest or not. I know I was dishonest. And as long as I continue to be that person, I will always look in the mirror and know. And that's what that piece of cake for me was about. It's not about the cake. It's about change, you know. And so last time I went to Trima, I didn't steal any cake. I asked. It's this amazing thing happens when you just say, can I have a piece of cake? Yeah, not a problem. Go, you know. It's like, wow. Don't have to steal the cake. Anyway, and as I said, you know, my first year was awesome. And it's not the same for everybody. I did not have a relationship. I didn't have kids. I didn't have, you know, I had nothing to go back to. So my whole life just became completely and utterly about this. You know, right in that first year, I was already sponsoring people. I was already in service positions. I was already, and I would fellowship with people. We would travel together, me and my fellows. We would do all kinds of stuff. I stayed in treatment for a year. I needed a year, you know. I was that incapable of living life that I needed to be in a place for a year that would ring a bell to tell me to get up and brush my teeth, because that's how useless I was, you know. But yeah, in that year, I got pushed into what was kind of one of my first big things was, you know, and this is again going back to the people, because we kind of became my adopted little surrogate family was Don, Julia, and Keith, who for some reason kept allowing me back. A lot of rehabs have a policy that if you relapse and you go back, they don't take you back. And if it wasn't for this rehab, who had, you know, 7 good days of you can come back, you know, it was also about the people. I mean, for one thing, you know, I remember getting into a group. I was always expecting to be faced with a bunch of saints, you know. This is what I love about Alcoholics Anonymous, because when I went to certain other places, you know, it was always about, there was this level, there was this pedestal that people were on. And you know, you're very good people, and you're very spiritual, and you don't say a naughty word, and you don't all that kind of stuff. And that kind of like, I don't know, like I had aversion to that kind of stuff, you know. And I remember sitting in a room, and this guy was in there trying to teach us how to work this program, and he had tattoos and muscles, and he said naughty words. And I was like, wow, you can actually be cool in recovery, you know. Like, I don't have to be a saint. I just have to, you know, try and be a decent person. And it was like, I felt comfortable. Julia, who, I don't know how, she said, let's try again, let's try again, let's try again. Every time I went back and I badmouthed that place, I used in that place. I did all the stuff that we do, you know, it's about money and it's da-da-da-da-da, you know, and they took me back again and again and again, and they forgot about it. They just said, cool, you're back, let's do it, you know. And she was always at those stairs welcoming, putting her arms around me and saying, welcome home, let's give it another try, you know. And Keith, I mean, the patience. I think it probably took a lot of convincing from Julia, but actually, you know, for Keith as well, the amount of patience, because I caused so much shit there, you know, just to keep trying and keep trying. There was definitely something different. And in that first year, Julia said to me, okay, so you've never done anything in your life aside from take drugs, and so you need to go and do something new. You need to try something different. You need to go and scuba dive. No, yeah, I don't do beaches, because beaches have sun, and I don't like sun, and there's sand, and sand sticks to you and stuff, and this palm chair, no. And then you carry that shit, and you got to walk backwards into the water with these bottles on. It's like, it doesn't, not my kind of thing, you know. And she said, no, you're going. I was like, okay. And from the minute I hit that water, it blew my mind. And this was important for me for so many reasons. One, because of contempt rights investigation. Most of the things I've really enjoyed in recovery that people have pushed me to do, I did not think I would be capable. My self-worth said you can't do it, and I did it anyway. You know? And I went, and the other thing around that was I didn't know you could actually enjoy life without drugs, you know. And to get down into that water and see that untouched world and go and experience that, you could not get me out of the water. I used to go and dive and come to the meeting in the morning and then go back out there again, and I was carrying people's gear, and I just did the basics, and I loved it, and I had such a good time, and then I got a bit obsessive, as we do, like I think after the first couple of dives I'd bought all the gear, and I had all the stuff and all the and I became an open water diver, then an advanced diver, then an emergency first responder, and then a dive master, and then an instructor, and then a specialty instructor, because we're a little overboard with shit, aren't we? But yeah, what that kind of proved to me as well, which was huge, and through a lot of help from Don when it came to physics and physiology, that was something I didn't think I'd be capable of doing, was passing an exam. And when it came to the dive master, there was all these equations and stuff, and I'm a school dropout. I didn't think I would be capable of doing any of that stuff. I can go and do skills, that's cool, but when it came to actually learning, sitting down with a book and studying, I didn't think I could do that. And I got pushed, I got pushed by people who cared about me, and I made it, and I did it. And that was just one more reference point of most of the things I believe about myself are not true. That's been another huge thing for me in recovery, and why I have to check my mind out all the time. My second year, I was at the house every weekend. I came up on the weekend. It wasn't a huge house back then, so, don't be resentful, but we actually used to take people out to dinner. On a Friday night, we'd go to dinner, and then we'd go to the meeting. We'd come back, I'd spend the weekend, and then I'd go back on Sunday, and then I'd work in the week. I went back into my original line of work, which was IT. I thought, going back into the business that I was no longer welcome at, that now that I was in recovery, I'm going to make this work, and it's going to be amazing, because I'm so capable now. And we rode that business into the ground, mostly due to, I don't know why. Just didn't work, it didn't work. And I guess it was around that time that Keith said to me, well, you've been doing this for a really long time. Why don't you come and volunteer? Why don't you come up here and do some groups and do whatever? And I think at that point I started coming up 3 days a week, and I loved it, Another thing for me, I spend my life in rehab. I don't want to be in rehab anymore, Now I'm in rehab all week. Best part about rehab was driving down the driveway, going home. But completely contrary to what I would think would be the most passion-driven thing I would do in my entire life. Going against my head and doing it, was actually, I found that was what I wanted to do. So IT went out the window, completely changed, and moved over into doing this. Another thing around this time, again, I said there's so many things that happened, but getting into a relationship, and I'm not being cocky when I say this, but I'm one of those who follow suggestions. I was not going to put a foot out of line. I was not going to give up my recovery for anybody or anything. And I just, when somebody said no, not a good idea, I listened and I did what I was told. And so obviously, as most of you know, my wife had gone through treatment. And just for the record, nothing happened in treatment, okay? And I was a volunteer. I wasn't working there. It was a different story, and there was nothing happening then. She left. She went into the rooms. She was in the rooms for quite a long time, and eventually, through common friends, because my best friend was her best friend's husband, we started to get interested in each other. I was always interested. I always thought she was cute, but stepped away. And I phoned Don up. I said, listen, that girl, Natalie? Yeah, of course, And I said, well, she's doing really well and everything, and, I think, because I need to first explain why it's going to be okay. And, she's doing really well. She didn't mean it's good, right? So, yeah, cool, can I ask her out to coffee? And he said, no. I said, okay. She needs to work on her recovery, and that's her priority for now, and this is your priority. I said, okay, cool. So I waited. And some time went by, I don't know how long, and eventually I phoned him up again. I said, okay, well, listen, some time has gone by, and what do you think? And he said, yeah, I think coffee would be cool. It'd be a good idea. So I phoned her up, And I said, it wouldn't sound as cool as I might say it because I was shitting myself. But I was like, do you want to go out to coffee? And she was like, well, I need to ask my sponsor. I was like, oh, because I know Julia. I was like, oh, this isn't going to happen. So she phoned her sponsor, and her sponsor said no. So she phoned me back and said, like, sorry, my sponsor says no. And so we respected that, and it took a bit of back and forth, and eventually, I don't think I sulked much. And eventually, we got the go-ahead from both sides, And the reason why I share that is just, like, what makes me feel good about my recovery is the things that I've had to do, I've done in the right way, because my conscience is there, and I know to get involved with a newcomer is not okay, not just for me, but for a newcomer. And I was not going to cross that line, And so, I got into a relationship, and that for me was terrifying because I had no drugs and alcohol in my system, and I had to try and do this thing. And I found that a lot of my pre-addict stuff, came flooding back to me. And although I dealt with certain areas very well in recovery and practicing principles and whatever, this was now a new area that I hadn't done. And so all that stuff came back. I was fearful, and I was insecure, and I didn't know what to do. And I could have a full conversation on a text message, and then when we were in the same room, I was just like, couldn't talk, And I had to learn to do that. And I guess, cut a long story short, that's my wife and I our first priority has always been our recoveries. That's pissed each other off a lot, especially because she calls me out better than I call her out. But that's our priority, has always been our priority. And I guess moving on from there, because there's a lot of long stories in there, but I got married. I got married in recovery, and that was another whole. How's the time? Time's good. Can I tell a story about the helicopter? Okay. So this was really cool. So we were. So we were planning this whole thing, because I was going to propose, and so we went up to what is kind of my favorite place is Champagne Castle up there in the mountains, and we were going to do this thing. I was going to take her up with a helicopter to the top of the mountain. I was going to propose there. It was going to be really awesome, and then weather happened, and so my mom and I like sneaking around. I think she was getting all self-obsessed because she knew we were talking about something, and we were. So we're planning this whole thing. And the pilot's going, sorry, like the weather's bad, we can't do this. And so eventually I was like, oh, well, I can't, just going to have to make another plan. So we went to this other place, and I took her to this other place, down to this valley where there's a stream, and it was like really cool and romantic, and got down on one knee and proposed properly like a gentleman. And she said yes, obviously. Anyway, So that was really awesome moment. But then we get back, and the pilot phones up and says, the weather's cleared. So my mom, I'm not blaming my mom, but my mom's a very dishonest person. Although she's dishonest in a good way, because she's dishonest to make good things happen for people. And I kind of believe that, And so my mom's like, listen, I felt bad. I told the pilot, cool. So I need you guys to go and pretend to propose again on top of the mountain, because this guy was like, he was so excited and everything, and I just didn't know what to say, because he was like, felt so honored that we would, he was going to be a part of it. And it's like, oh, so we got there, we got in the chopper, we flew up to the mountain. I took her off to far away, and the two pilots are standing there. They're like, I got down on one knee. I said, how's it, Sticky? You want to marry me? And she was like, oh. And they were clapping, hey. Because we're good actors. Anyway, I've had lots of amazing moments like that. So, next big thing for me, kids, kids. I don't like kids. I'm one of those guys who was just, can break it. So never thought I would have kids, and we found out we were pregnant, and she was, and wow, fear What kind of parents am I going to be? All this kind of stuff went on for me. You'd think I want to share this part for a good reason, but not actually. Lots of amazing stuff around that child, but a lot of really bad things for me too, So I learned, you learn in recovery when you've been around a while. Anyone who's in the first 3 to 5 years of recovery will always judge other people's recoveries and be like, he's not working his program right, and look at this guy, and ha ha ha, like no compassion, no nothing, because that's where they're at. When you've lived for a while and you've been in a relationship and you have all these responsibilities and you make some cock-ups, eventually you chill out a bit, and start to realize that the drugs and the alcohol, that's gone now, but now you start to find out really what the problem is. And I had accumulated some resentment to I can't say, but towards this person over a very long time, and that had gone into all kinds of other stuff, and through this period I got really sick, thinking that because I'm now got a couple of years sobriety, I'm kind of higher grade. You see, you guys got to work the low grade stuff, but I'm higher grade, so my momentum will carry me through. I can be resentful a bit for a while, and I started getting quite sick around that point, and this unfortunately went on through the pregnancy, and I became addicted to computer games. Big warning flag, to a point where I was in a studio playing computer games every night until late hours of the night while my pregnant wife was lying alone in bed, going through that, and I guess, responsibility and all that kind of stuff that it's so easy for me as an addict to want to kind of hide away from, and not deal with the stuff that's going on for me, and I hurt my wife through that period, and I really did, and so it wasn't a good pregnancy, and it wasn't good for her, and I guess until Jada was born, which was kind of just starting to come out of that stuff, it was a massive lesson for me, a massive lesson for me that I'm not immune. I'm not immune just because I stay clean and sober for a while, that I can't still be that selfish person, and I still can't act out in my disease in other ways, as I've had to learn a few times through recovery. But anyway, and then, the birth of my daughter was just mind-blowing. It was completely different to how I thought it was going to be, I thought it was going to be this hectic thing, and I was going to be this horrible parent. We weren't going to, but it was actually completely the opposite. I was staring into my child's eyes, and kind of what comes up for me around this stuff, when I think back to my last days of active addiction, if anybody relates to the loneliness, I spent weeks by myself. I had no friends, no family wanted to be near me. The only contact I had with other people was when I was selling stuff, stealing stuff, or buying drugs. That was it. And I remember quite vividly a lot of the periods that I spent lying on a mattress, really hurting about that stuff, wanting to commit suicide, not having the guts to commit suicide, not having the guts to live, and just that complete and utter loneliness and isolation that the big book talks about. We will know loneliness such as few others do. And I spent a long time like that, and I remember kind of around my daughter's birth thinking how lucky I am, and how blessed I am to be married and to have another life involved in my life, and to have my family back, and to have my friends involved in my life, and that kind of continued on, and obviously my son was born a bit later, and today, I don't know how my time is, today, the really important things for me around why I work this program and why I come into these rooms still to this point, because most people would think, well, if you get clean and sober and you stay clean and sober, why, Caleb, would you come to meetings for 12 years? Why would you have a sponsor for 12 years and tell them everything that's going on for you still? Why would you try and practice these principles in your life still to this day? Why would you do all of this stuff? And the answer for me is about those promises. The answer for me is, I come here and I do this because it works. You know, I don't, to this day, I'm still one of those people who's addicted to mind blowing. And I don't think that'll ever change about me. I don't do mundane. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's the wrong thing to say, but I don't know if I would have stayed clean in mundane. You know, staying clean is good at first, but it only gets you so far. Like, I needed to replace drugs and alcohol with something that would really make my life satisfactory, worth living, exciting, mind-blowing, difficult, painful, all those things together to experience life. You know, and I think about those days when I was alone, and I think about how my life is today, you know, and I'm not saying all the time I'm the super grateful guy. I can get lost in the busyness of life and all the stuff involved, but, you know, today I wake up with 6 little brown eyes looking at me, you know, like, well, two of them are adult eyes, whatever, you know what I mean. So, you know, I got 2 kids, I have a wife, I have a home, I'm surrounded by friends and family. You know, that studying stuff, it moved on. You know, today I train addiction professionals. I mean, just saying that sounds like scary and weird. Like, is that even ethically okay? I don't know. Because someone like me shouldn't be doing shit like that. The responsibility that I get to enjoy. You know, like today I used to run away from responsibility. Today I like responsibility because it fills my life. It fills my life with so many things and the gifts that come along with what I thought would be my biggest enemy, responsibility, has been huge. You know, I own 2 other businesses. I work full-time in a treatment center. I work with addicts all the time because that's really all I'm interested in. You know, there's life out there. There's normal people. I know some normal people. I hang out with them. They're okay. You know, but this is really where I belong, and this is my family. These are the people I want to be with, you know. And my wife is part of that, and that's what her passion is as well. And my kids live in a recovery home. You know, I know it's not like that for everybody, but I feel extremely blessed that my kids were born into a life with 2 recovering addict parents. You know, my kids will never, touch wood, will never see me drunk and high. Have never seen me drunk and high. You know, they'll see me angry and come in with the hand. But, you know, that'll be about the worst of it, hopefully. You know, I can actually offer my kids a life. I pay my bills. You know, I earn my own income. I don't bum money off my parents anymore. My parents cannot take my car away from me. I know this sounds a bit like arrogant, but like my parents used to always take my shit away. You know why? Because it was theirs. You know, people could always take things away from me because I never earned or owned anything. Today, you can't take my car keys away from me because they're mine, unless you're a cop and I'm drunk. I don't know. You know? Like, and that makes me feel good. I guess the point of why I'm saying all of this stuff is because I need to live with myself. I need to feel like I am a productive, responsible member of society who tries to live as a decent person, who tries to be of service to other people, because self-worth is not some synthetic thing that a pill a psychiatrist gives me is going to give me. It's not going to take the depression away. It's not going to take the way I feel about my life away. It's not going to take the guilt and the shame away. The way I live my life is the only thing that's going to take that away. I have to live a life of purpose. I have to live a life of meaning. I have to be useful to feel useful. You know? Like they said to me in the early days, oh, you don't like feeling useless. Yeah, I don't like feeling I'm so useless. So be useful. Oh. You know, so simple. So simple, the principles of this program. And I love that. There's nothing I've faced in 12 years of recovery that hasn't moved away from the very simple basic stuff I've had to do in my first year of recovery. It's all exactly the same. I sometimes think there's going to be more or that it requires some bigger solution, but it never does. You know, in everything, and I've gone through some hectic stuff in recovery, it's always brought me back down to basics. Sit your ass down, put a pen to paper, look at what's going on for you, go and admit where you were wrong, get out of your head, help somebody else. It's the same principles that work for every problem that I've ever had so far in recovery, you know. And I guess, just in closing, to talk about Julia, you know, I met Julia at a moment in my life when everyone had pretty much given up on me, you know, and most of you never got to meet her. And this was a woman who somehow, she had a gift to get through to people that you could normally not get through to. She had a way with words, and she had a way with people. And I really owe so much to her, And probably the most difficult thing I went through in recovery was 5 years ago. How long ago is it now? 6 years ago when she passed away. I did lots of stuff with Julia. We would scuba dive together, we did all kinds of things, and so many times in my recovery, as much as my wife's recovery, she was there for us every step of the way. But she relapsed, She relapsed because she was really good at carrying a message and telling people what they needed to do, but just somehow unable to do it. She was really good at giving love, but somehow incapable of receiving it. And I guess that was one of the things that really shook my recovery, because I thought there's these 3 pillars, of strength in my recovery. It's Don, and Keith and Julia, and to know that somebody can actually relapse, when they know so much about this program and they can sit in that room and teach me so much and tell me what I need to do, just completely rocked me, but taught me that we're all still at the same place. We're all still alcoholics, and we all still have to live this way. And if we don't, it doesn't matter how much you know and how long you've been here, you will use. And she struggled to get it together, and around kind of the end, she got sick, and it was really a result of physically where she was through her active addiction, and she got pneumonia overseas, and she came back, and she went straight into hospital, and she had about 2 weeks. And I thank God for these moments, because once again, I did not want to be around her. Mortality freaks me out. If anybody gets sick, I just don't want to be there. And she was up there, and Keith kept saying to me, go and visit her, go and visit her. You're going to go and visit her, son? Yeah, I'm going to. And eventually the one day kind of had me cornered. He went up to me behind the car. He said, you're going to go up and visit her? I was like, yeah. And I knew, because I said yeah, if I didn't go, they would be dishonest. And I was like, oh, fuck, yeah. So I went, and I went into the room, and she was incapacitated. She couldn't move. Her organs had all swollen up. We didn't even know how present she was. And I sat next to her, as awkward as all hell, and I just spoke. I just said, this is what's going on, and so, and we miss you, and whatever. I didn't know she was hearing me until I saw the tear run down her cheek. And then I knew. And I knew she could hear me. And I said, I love you very much, and we're looking forward to you coming out here, and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And I thank God Keith made me go, because she died. She died the next day. And if I hadn't gone and seen her, they would have killed me, And I kind of, today what I really look at is I live in the legacy of Julia, and what she gave to me through her sponsoring my wife, to us being together. I know I have that very long story about how Cedars came about, but where it comes and starts for me is I got well there, my wife got well there. My kids are a result of that, or a result of the work that Don, Keith, and Julia gave to me, and giving me this program in the way that I needed to have this program given to me, which is that special part about that house on the hill I talk about. And as a result of that, everything in my life is as it is today. Because if it didn't happen, and if I go back to even Julia and her recovery, and Keith's recovery, and everything right back to EBT and Bill Wilson sitting at that table over 80 years ago, would never have happened. And so that's why I know that God is involved in every single aspect of my life, even when I don't think so, even when I'm angry with him. He's had this plan, and he's put it together. And the synchronicity of all those events, for me, this alcoholic who always had a problem in believing in God, is undeniable. And I thank God for this program and for my recovery. Thanks for hearing me share.